Hey, my name's Jack Nicholson and welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, I want to share with you probably the most insane thing that I've heard come out of the Labour government. And that's saying a lot, I'm sure some of you would agree on here. This has been reported in the Times, the Guardian and various other outlets over the last few days. And I think this is really, really bad news. I'm not talking for landlords, I'm talking for anyone that owns a property, and especially if you own a property down south. It's a new tax that the government is looking at introducing, and in this video I'm going to break down on just how expensive it could be for some people. In fact, I've worked out that a friend of mine would be paying £43,000 per year if this was to come through. So this is something you really want to know about. Now, if you're new around here and you haven't done already, do make sure you subscribe to the channel over there and hit that bell notification. We've got all the latest property news, interest rate news, house price news, investing news, and much, much more. And I want to get as many people aware of this video because I think this is really important, and your part is simple. If you could do two things: firstly, smash like, tickle like, do something to the like button, and next hit that share button and share it with someone that you know that owns a property, because I think more people need to know about this so something can be done potentially to stop it going through. Because if Labour hear some backlash on this, maybe they'll back down. And so what I want to talk about is something called house value tax or something like that. That's the name of it. There isn't a proper name yet because it's not out. But Rachel Reeves has a problem. The government aren't bringing in enough money. They promise that they won't raise income tax. They've promised that they won't hit VAT. And I think they promised they won't hit national insurance, at least the amount that you pay, because they already put it up for businesses. And so those are things that they're trying to avoid increasing. So they've got to tax other things considerably in order to increase the income for the government. Now, one of the things they're looking at is inheritance tax. That's probably going to be absolutely decimated and made really, really crazy high in the next budget. But the next thing is all about getting rid of two taxes. Now, this will sound good at the beginning. It's all about getting rid of stamp duty, and it's also about getting rid of council tax. Now, you probably don't like paying either of those things, but then they'll replace it with a property tax. And this property tax would start initially on new purchases. So let's just say you purchase a property, you would then not pay council tax, you wouldn't pay stamp duty on that transaction, but you would pay this property tax. And the problem is, this property tax is on an annual basis. So you're going to keep paying this property tax indefinitely. There's also a tax that they're considering in this that would be on the seller of the property. Now, the seller of the property at the moment could pay tax on capital gains. So if they were selling a second home, for example, there could be capital gains tax. There's not capital gains tax if they're selling a house to buy another property to live in. But they're saying potentially you could get taxed for selling your home as well. So there's two sides to this then. So you're not getting a big lump of stamp duty, but you are getting a recurring payment. Now, what the proposal is that properties sold over £500,000 would pay a tax annually of 0.54%. So it's any property over that amount. Any property over 1 million would pay a tax of 0.81% annually as well. So this effectively is a wealth tax. Now, the problem I have with this is there's a lot of people that have quite valuable properties, especially if they live in the southeast. So average house prices, if you're unsure, in London are £666,000. So almost all properties in London would fall into this criteria. And so there's lots of people living in these properties that are asset rich but cash poor. So maybe they own a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom house in London. That could be worth £1 million quite easily in some areas. They don't have a mortgage on that, but they're on a pension. And the only reason they can survive is because it might not cost loads to heat that property. And the council tax actually in London, in some areas, isn't so bad. It can be more expensive outside London. And so those people can afford to live in that property. Now, what the initial proposal on this is that these new deals would kick in every time someone purchases a property. So new properties would move over to this new property tax system. But then eventually it would roll out to everybody. And where I think this is really unfair is if this was how it went, this would cover, they've worked out that this would create enough income that it would cover council tax as it stands and stamp duty. So you could replace both of those. But if you think about it, almost nobody up north would be paying this tax, and all of the southern people would be paying to fund the northern councils. Now, obviously, some of that does happen already, but this would change it massively, because if you live in Doncaster, you do pay council tax right now, but you wouldn't under this new scheme. And so that would be crazy. But where it really gets crazy is I have a friend that lives in a £6 million house. Now, you might say, well, good for them, but they're retired now. And they did earn good money, and they worked very hard, and they invested in this property, and that does very well for them. But they can afford that because they don't have many outgoings now. They've reduced their outgoings and they live off a pension now. And that's how they can afford it. But I worked out if this was rolled out to their property, a £6 million house at the moment, their annual bill would go up to £43,000. Now, that's not even their pension. Like, they don't even have that much coming in on their pension. So unfairly, I feel they would have to sell that property. And remember, if they sell the property, there's a new tax going in on that, which they haven't leaked how much they're considering for that at the moment. But there's a seller's tax going in on that, so they'd be taxed on that. And they'd have to look to move to another area so it was affordable. And I just don't think this is the best way to do it. I think council tax kind of works. It's not perfect and it could be improved. But I think burdening people with massive bills that are at a later stage of their life. Remember, most of the people that live in the bigger properties are older people that, while they might have a big house, their income is likely to start slowing down at some point. And so that means that they're going to move on to their pension, and they haven't budgeted for any of this kind of stuff. I think this kind of thing will push Labour out in the next election if this is openly discussed in the budget or considered. But according to the Times, there's quite a lot of legs on this, and it is seriously being considered by the government. And I don't think this is good for anyone. And I think this, you might think, well, I don't have a 500 grand house. Well, eventually will. And houses go up over time. And maybe you have family members that live in other areas of the country as well. And what the biggest problem here is going to be is house prices that get close to that 500 grand ceiling. Let's say you've got a house that's 450 grand right now. That property is going to get really held back. It's going to be very hard in the future to ever sell that for 501 grand and tick it into this property tax limit. So that property price is going to get held back. But the houses that are above that, they're probably going to go up considerably more, because the seller will want to sell the property for more in order to get some money to pay the tax bill that they're going to get from selling this property. I think this is the most ludicrous idea I've heard from Labour, and I've shared some crazy ones on this channel. We've had things like the Renters' Rights Bill, which I think is ridiculous, a lot of it, but I do think some of it is partly fair. On this, I don't think this is smart in any way at all, but it's being talked about, and it could be in the next budget. So I want to know what you think about this. To me, it's mental, it's insane, crazy, probably the craziest thing I've ever heard. And I think a lot of people are going to get unfairly penalised that are retiring, that could afford to live in their property because they've worked really hard, and they deserve that property if they've worked and slaved away for years and years and years. To change the rules on someone at a late date like that is totally unfair, in my opinion. I want to know what you think about this in the comments. Give me a like on the video. You're not liking it because you think that this is a great strategy by the government. You're just liking it to get more views on YouTube. I think more people need to be aware of this. Do make sure you grab our ebook, How to Get the Best Mortgage in 2025 and Beyond. That's a free ebook down below. Do also check out all the other content as well on the channel, including this video right here.